Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Before we start with our today's session, we have an announcement. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS is conducting a national scholarship test which is scheduled to be conducted on 6th of March 2022. How do you register? Follow the link given in the description box, give the necessary details and you would win a stand of winning some attractive scholarships. Let's get started and look into the first question. Consider the following statements. The World Wildlife Day is celebrated on 3rd of March as on this day in 1973, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora was signed. According to the WWF, the most trafficked mammal in the world is pangolins. Vaquita is the world's rarest marine mammal and is on the edge of extinction. Which of the statements given above are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the World Wildlife Day. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option is right. The World Wildlife Day, yes, is celebrated on 3rd of March as on this day, back in the year 1973, we have the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora was signed. Since it was signed in 1973, as a respect to this day, we have the celebration of World Wildlife Day. So the first statement is right. When we look into the second statement, yes, according to WWF, the most trafficked mammal happens to be the pangolins. The second statement is right. The third statement says Vaquita is the world's rarest marine mammal and is on the edge of extinction. This statement is also right. So when we speak about the World Wildlife Day, what is it? This is celebrated on 3rd of March every year because of the anthropogenic induced factors. This has led to threats to the number of animals as well as plants. So bringing an awareness about these species so that the government, the non-governmental organizations, the private sector and the civil society organizations all come together so that we can go ahead with sustainable development. So basically ensuring the conservation of these wildlife species including animals and plants and bringing an awareness to the people is the major objective of the World Wildlife Day. So in this World Wildlife Day, what we also have is a theme. So the theme for the year 2022 happens to be safeguarding key species for ecosystem restoration. So every year a particular theme is selected and emphasis is laid on this particular theme so that we would be able to have discussions about this particular theme and implement the solutions to conserve them as well. This is also in line with what is called as the sustainable developmental goals. When we speak about sustainable developmental goals, we have number of sustainable developmental goals. One is about climate action, the other is about life on land, the other is on the life below the water. All this is taken into picture when designing such a theme for that particular year. So conducting various programs, awareness drives through different platforms, focusing on spreading the message especially to children and youth, encouraging individuals and groups to organize events, celebrations at their level through various virtual discussions, film festivals, art shows and talk shows are some of the part of this particular initiative. So bringing in the anthropogenic factors and ultimately bringing a solution to the conservation of the world life is what is this day all about. Now let's look into the next practice question. With respect to National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, which of the following statements are correct? It is an extra constitutional body. It functions under the Ministry of Home Affairs of the central government. A person who has held the office of chairperson shall be eligible for renomination. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 1 and 3 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the PIB makes a reference to the NCPCR. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option, it says that the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights is an extra constitutional body. This is a right statement. What do we mean by extra constitutional body? Those bodies or authorities which is not mentioned in the constitution are the extra constitutional bodies. So if it is passed by an act of the parliament, a statutory organization is also an extra constitutional body. So in the present situation, the National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights is a statutory body since it is not mentioned in the constitution but passed by the law of the parliament. It happens to be an extra constitutional body. So the first statement is right. So anything which is not mentioned in the constitution will be an extra constitutional body. It can be a statutory body. It can also be a body which is passed by the executive resolution as well. When you look into the second statement, it functions under the Ministry of Home Affairs of the central government. This is a wrong statement. Why? Because it does not function under the Ministry of Home Affairs, but instead it is under the Ministry of Women and Child Development of the central government. So the second statement is wrong. When we look into the third statement, a person who has held the office of chairperson shall be eligible for renomination. This is once again the right statement. When we look into the composition of this particular NCPCR, what do we have? We have the chairperson. We also have 6 members as well. Both the chairperson and 6 members are eligible for renomination. So basically they have a fixed period of term. They hold for a period not exceeding 3 years, and if there is a permission given by the government for renomination, they can be renominated. When it comes to the chairperson, he can hold this position till the age of 65 years, and when it comes to the members, they can hold this position till the age of 60 years. But the timeline for both of them is 3 years, and ultimately both can also be renominated as well. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following statements about Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change are correct? The IPCC engages in scientific research. The IPCC provides objective and comprehensive scientific information on anthropogenic climate change, including the natural, political, and economic impacts and risks and possible response options. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the IPCC. Let us try and understand what are these options. When we look into the first option, it says that IPCC engages in scientific research. This is a wrong statement. Why? IPCC does not itself engage in the scientific research. What does it do? It will have the scientists. These scientists from in and around the world will be asked to read some other scientific related literature. They will take inputs from these scientific literature and give the suggestion to the IPCC. So basically they themselves are not engaged in scientific research, but what do? There are number of scientific literatures in and around the world. They read these scientific literatures, extract the information. Such information would be ultimately delivered to the government. So basically these are the key inputs to the international climate change negotiations. On one side, the scientific research is not done by them, and all the information given by the scientists to the IPCC would be given to the government organizations and also for the international climate change negotiations. When they are given to the governments, the same can be used by the governments for their own policy making as well, and at the same time they will collect the relevant facts. These facts are also given to the international climate change negotiations. When we speak about the IPCC report, they have something called as the working groups. These working groups are 3 in number. We have the group 1, then we have the group 2, and finally what we have is the group 3. When we speak about the group 1, what do they understand is how is that this whole issue of anthropogenic induced factors or the natural factors, or what are the issues concerning the climate change, what is the scientific rationale to it, will be understood by the group 1. So group 1 will ensure that it deals with the scientific basis for the climate change. Why is the climate change happening? So this entire analysis will be undertaken by this group 1. Then we also have the group 2, which will try and identify what could be the impact of this particular report. So basically there is an issue, there is a scientific basis of the climate change. So if this climate change issue occurs, what would be the vulnerabilities, what would be the impact to the people and that particular region will be ascertained by the group 2. Then we have group 3, which basically looks into how can we combat the climate change. So we have 3 working groups which will first understand understand what is the climate change, the premise on which it is based. The second, we'll look at the impact. The third, will work on the solutions. So the IPCC provides objective and comprehensive scientific information on anthropogenic climate change, including natural, political, economic impacts and the risks and possible response actions. So these three groups basically work on the second objective. So the answer to this would be 2 only. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following states are parties to Convention on Cluster Munitions? France, New Zealand, United Kingdom, India, Ukraine, Russia and South Africa. The answer to this is 1, 2, 3 and 7 only, which basically means we have France, New Zealand, United Kingdom and South Africa who are parties to the Convention on Cluster Munitions, but we do not have India, Ukraine and Russia. So the answer to this would be 1, 2, 3 and 7 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the cluster bombs. Let us try and understand what are these cluster bombs, and we will also try and understand which are the countries party to the Convention on Cluster Munitions. First up, what are these cluster bombs? These cluster bombs can typically be airdropped but can also be launched from the ground or from the ships. So remember, they can be launched from the air, they can be launched from the ships and they can also be launched from the ground. What exactly happens? You would have something like a canister. So this is the canister. If they are dropped via the aircraft, what would happen? The canister opens. It is closed, and the minute it opens, what you have is these small ammunitions or bomblets which are immediately dropped to the earth. So the canister opens mid-air and can release up to several hundred sub ammunitions. So basically you would have one canister which will have multiple bomblets. You will have multiple sub ammunitions. So basically one huge canister in itself will carry multiple number of bomblets, and ultimately when they are dispatched over a particular area, it can threaten large number of people as well. Sometimes it may detonate, sometimes it may not detonate as well. And if at times it does not detonate, and if it is a civilian population area, they may go off all of a sudden and they may lead to large scale casualty as well. So remember, in order to prevent these cluster bombs, what we have is one of the conventions called as the Convention on Cluster Ammunitions. According to this convention, it prohibits the use, production, transfer and stockpiling of the cluster munitions. Basically, about 110 states are parties to this convention, and there are many countries which are not part to this convention. And some of the countries which are not part to it happens to be Ukraine, Russia and India. As part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section, is United States of America part of the convention? Is China part of this convention? Which are the major other countries which are not part of this convention or not parties to this convention? Please put them on the comment section. Now let's look into the next practice question. Why is there a concern about copper smelting plants? They may release lethal quantities of carbon monoxide into the environment. The copper slag can cause the leaching of some heavy metals into the environment. They may release sulfur dioxide as a pollutant. Select the correct answer using the code given below. The answer to this is 2 and 3 only. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2021. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is licentiate medical practitioners. Let us try and understand who these medical practitioners are. When we speak about the rural India, we have two problems in the rural area with respect to the healthcare. One is the infrastructure issue. The other is the doctors issue. Even if we have the infrastructure, we do not have enough number of doctors to take care of the rural section of the people. So what do we have is a major imbalance when it comes to the doctor and the patient issue. So these doctors for the greener pastures may come to the urban areas, may also work in the private sector industries, but unfortunately what we have is a lacuna or a problem with respect to doctors in the rural area. Why? Because we do not have enough number of them. As an alternative to this, in order to overcome this particular issue, there is a particular proposal, and that proposal is what is called as licentiate medical practitioners. What exactly are these these medical practitioners, when we speak about the MBBS degree, they have a fruitful years of 5 years. They may also have to extend another 6 odd months when they have to serve in the rural areas. So they have a complete course which they have to fulfill for 5 years. But when it comes to the licentiate medical practitioners, they need not have to study for 5 years, but there will be a course which will be scheduled for 3 to 3.5 years. So these medical doctors who will be studying for 3 to 3.5 years and not 5 years and after that are called as the licentiate medical practitioners. This particular proposal was made by the Union Health Ministry earlier, and such a practice was also prevalent in India in the 1940s as well. So the practice of creating those medical practitioners who would study for 3 to 3.5 years and not 5 and after that is what is called as licentiate medical practitioners. Why do we need them? That is because as of now we have large number of our population in rural India. They do not have the doctors. When they go to the primary healthcare sectors, they do not have people who can take care of them. In order to prevent this, what we require is the medical practitioners. If we have these medical practitioners who are able to fulfill some of the objectives, we would be able to save number of people and treat the patients as well. Up until 1940s, you had the primary care physicians who were able to treat the rural people, and such a process was discontinued after the Bore committee recommendation that happened in the year 1946. Since this was a recommendation made by the Union Health Ministry, we can consider and see if this can be implemented or not, says the author. So what are the recommendations given by the author? We have to start a short-term course in the modern medicine. So this is not to do with the traditional medicine that we have. This will be in line with the modern medicine. This will be on the basis of not just the merit, but also on the aptitude for the medical service, and people who know the vernacular language, people who are from a particular community should be selected for that particular role in that village, says the author. Does this mean, are we going to enlarge on the urban and the rural divide? Are we treating our rural people as the second class citizens? The author says no to this particular argument. He says that these medical practitioners will not be replacing the MBBS doctors, but instead they will work in the subordinate capacity to the MBBS doctors. What is the way forward for such medical practitioners? After they are done with their undergraduate program, they can also choose the path of post graduation as well, and they can also move higher up in the public healthcare system. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.